listening to the Tricorder Transmissions. Shore Leave. Episode 20.
Just what the doctor ordered. Right, doctor? I couldn't have prescribed better.
Thanks for tuning in once again to Shore Leave, your Star Trek convention community podcast. I am Jeff Hewlett, and here with me is the best co-host this side of the Alpha Quadrant, the one and only Heather Barker's here.
I agree with that sentiment. Ha ha ha.
You may be the best co-host on this side of any quadrant. But
yada yada yada.
So guys, we're back again with another Shore Leave and a couple things to talk about before we jump into the show. Reminding everybody out there, our iTunes review contest is still running through the 23rd of April 2017. Please jump over to iTunes and leave our show a written review and let us know who you are so that we can enter you into our contest for the $20 Shop LLAP gift card. And you can find the direct link to our iTunes feed on our website, the tricordertransmissions.com. So please leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. So coming up later in the show, we have a brand new segment we're going to be introducing, as well as some recent STLV news. But before we get into all of that stuff, we have two really special numbers that we want to talk about. The first number is, in fact, this is the 20th episode of Shore Leave.
20.
Yeah, amazing how far we've come in just over, a year's time. It's incredible that we're here. It doesn't feel like a year to me.
It feels like 3 years to me.
Heather.
No, I remembered sitting, I think it was like Christmas time. I was talking to you, doing that little, it was like a guest appearance.
Yeah, we did the Christmas extravaganza, yeah.
Yeah. And we did that. And then I was just like, let me talk to you about this idea I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I never expected a year later to be where we are. It's been really great for me. And I think it's, the feedback that we get from the community and our friends has been good. So I think we're helpful for the community.
Oh, for sure.
So it's just so much good.
Yeah, it's been so much fun, and we've met so many incredible people through the show, and one of whom is coming up at the end of this episode. But we started our first episode. Heather just said that we were on a Christmas episode, so that was December of 2015, and the first episode of Shore Leave hit the airwaves on January 24th of 2016.
We got right on top of that. Got that in action there.
Yeah, we did. And that was our first episode that featured our first segment of what we call our first cons, which was a very common segment through the first 5 or 6 episodes of the show. We had a lot of great people come on and talk about their first convention experiences. And Bill and Dan from the Trek Geeks podcast have been on to talk about first cons. We've had Claire Little, who is our Tavacron co-host and frequent contributor to Shore Leave. She was on talking about Jim Morehouse. My goodness, so many. Adam Drosen, people who've come back time and time again on some of our other series too. So we've brought so many more people into the Tricorder fold through Shore Leave.
Including Ian. You cannot leave out Ian.
Of course, Ian, our Gold Key Comics co-host, part of our original mission series here on the Tricorder Transmissions. And, this is pretty cool because this is the second time on Shore Leave we're leading up to the Vegas convention. So this will be our second year of Shore Leave, ramping up to go to Vegas. So pretty cool. I'm really getting excited because we've got so much great stuff on our roadmap, for episodes 21 and beyond. I can't believe how much stuff we have to do, how much work there is between now and the convention.
Yeah, and just not to mention like the ideas that we have for the future that we're just going to tease you about, listeners, and not actually tell you about. Ha.
Heather, you're getting as good at this as I am.
I promise that we will, but we want to announce those things closer to when they're actually going to be available for listeners. So keep your ears open, everyone.
Yes. So that's a good point because, like I just said, we have a lot of content lined up between now and the convention. So it's going to be Shore Leave extravaganza between now And then so many things. Our vendor episodes are coming up. We've got big surprise. Larry Nemechek is going to be here next week to talk about some of the things that's going to be going on for him at the convention. And we've got some more folks lined up, con advice episodes, and revisiting some of the topics that we talked about in depth with some more of our wonderful contributors coming on to go more in depth on some of those topics. So lots and lots and lots and lots of great stuff coming up. So, another great number. I said there were 2 numbers.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, this is another great number. And I'm really, really, God, I'm beside myself even saying this. Not only is it the 20th episode of Shore Leave, it's actually also the 200th overall episode of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. So a double milestone episode here.
I get to be on them both.
You get to be on them both. You have earned a spot on both, Heather. And, my God, I was talking to a friend of mine about the fact that we're releasing our 200th episode this week. The other day at work, one of the great friends of mine who's been a listener has listened to every single episode of this show. So he's listened to all 199 of them. Steve Sikoriak, great guy, great friend, big inspiration to me over the time. So thank you for always asking me about the show, Steve, and being with us on this journey this whole time, no matter what we were doing, no matter what series we were putting out, whatever topic it was. He's always been there to listen to us. So really appreciate that, Steve. But I was talking to him about this and, realizing the fact that the first episode of this show was August 4th, 2013. It's amazing to me. And our 4th anniversary is coming up, only in a few short months at the convention. That was when our original mission, started. And it was a couple of years before we became an actual podcast network. It was just that one long running show with a couple of sidebar, couple supplemental log episodes to talk about other Trek topics and have people on. Back in the day, we had the April A. Bear and Vernon Wilmer from the Star Trek Experience out in Vegas. Yep. That was one of our earliest interviews. We became friendly with them. And, it's amazing to me how much the show has grown and how many great people we've had get involved. You, Heather, it's been amazing what we've done together. And you're not only part of Shore Leave, you're part of all of our other series now as well. And Ian, who you mentioned earlier, who stepped up and became my Gold Key Comics co-host as part of the original Mission series. And so much great stuff has happened in these 200 episodes. And it's actually really an honor for me to be sitting here on a Shore Leave episode talking about the 200th episode. So this is really great. I'm really kind of getting choked up thinking about it.
Oh, don't cry. Well, it's very special to me. I don't want to bore our listeners with our mutual friend love here, but I think that we get along so well together, and Shore Leave is fun because we have fun together. And I try to tell everybody, I definitely tell Twitter how much I appreciate all the hard work that you do, because you are the machine behind Tricorder Transmissions and you keep it all working.
Thank you so much for that. That's very sweet of you to say. One of the running jokes about that, and I'm not going to go too far into it because I don't want to bore everybody, but one of the long running jokes is that I've edited so much of this audio from this show, I can visually identify words spoken by people like you and Craig and Ian. I can look at the screen. I can just look at the waveform and tell what word you said by looking at it. It's so strange, but I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of all of you guys talking.
I'm so glad to hear that in a non-creeper way.
No, it's great. It's wonderful. It just goes to show you how much content we've all put together and how much work all of us have put in. Yes. Every single one of us. You've been a big help with the planning and the scheduling and the bringing in of new guests and developing content, and Ian putting together all that work with the comic book episodes. We've got some more new stuff coming in the near future.
We do.
And, can't divulge it yet, but some great stuff coming in the next few weeks to commemorate the 200 plus episodes and our 4th anniversary. So more great stuff coming down the road. So enough of that. I don't want to bore anybody.
Oh, wait. One more thing. I mean, shouldn't we have a party?
Oh, Yes, we should. So yeah. And we got one planned, don't we?
So yeah, we do have one planned that I actually have to go look up the event.
Yeah, there's an event on our Facebook page.
Yes, it is on the Tricorder Transmissions page for everyone who is listening. So it's not tied to the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention page. We will share it there in our events section, but the actual party event is on the Tricorder page, and it's right on top, and it will be Friday, Friday the 8th, or Friday the 4th at 8 p.m. There we go. Numbers. I can do it. And we will update the location, probably something like Masquerade or iBar, but we're not 100% certain.
But we're going to find a place for this, and we are going to have a cake, and we're going to have some giveaways for all you guys. We're going to have some raffles. So you come in, you'll grab your ticket as on your way in, and we'll be raffling off some really cool new Tricorder and Shore Leave merchandise that we're going to be putting together and bringing with us to the convention out in Las Vegas. So if you're going to be in Las Vegas, Shore Leave listeners, I know a lot of you are, most of you are, stop by the Tricorder party. Let us know you're coming. Come to our Facebook page. Check off that you're going. You could win some cool prizes, and we would love to meet you. So,
yes, please come.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Heather. I completely blanked on that.
That's why I'm here, Jeff. That's why we do a podcast.
See, that's what Heather brings to the show, everybody. She keeps me on track. Thank you so much for that. So
what else is up?
Well, I'll tell you what else is up, and this is something that we always do here on Shore Leave. We are getting closer to the convention, and this time we actually do have some new STLV news that has come out. And the first thing, gasp. The first thing that we're going to go through is some of the new guest editions that have come out over the last week or so. And thank you to all of our friends in the unofficial Facebook group for keeping us informed when Creation updates their website, because I know I don't always remember to check it every day or every couple days. And so it's always great. Guys like Ron Snowden, thanks so much for being so diligent and letting us know when these things happen. So let's see here. We've got quite a few. The famous Robert Beltran, Chakotay is now signed on. Next up, we got Samantha Egger, who played Marie Picard in the 4th season TNG episode Family. Mm-hmm. So pretty cool. Let's see who else. Oh, Ron Jones, composer for a lot of the scores for many of the early season TNG episodes. So music lovers out there. And by the way, that La La Land collection of the TNG show music has some of that Ron Jones stuff on it. So if you want to go, I'm sure he'll sell them there in the vendor room, but that's also available out there. So you want to pick that up and bring it with you. That's a really good idea too. It's a really fantastic set if you're into Trek music. Let's see, who else? Oh, Camille Saviola from DS9 is going to be there. Oh, Daniel Stewart.
Yes, that's who I'm pretty excited about, because I don't know that he's been to an STLV ever before.
I don't recall ever seeing him on the list, so that's pretty cool. Patrick Stewart's son, of course, if you didn't know who he was. And he actually was in a TNG episode as well. So you can work to complete your TNG autograph and photo op collection by getting Daniel Stewart. Let's see, who else?
Greg Grunberg, who was in Heroes, and he was just in, did his little cameo in Beyond, and he did some voices, I think, in the 2009 Star Trek or Star Trek Into Darkness. Anyway, he's from Heroes. Last year, he was over at it was like the Las Vegas Toy Convention or something that was going on.
Oh, right. Yeah.
At the same time. He was over there, and now he's actually going to be at STLV, which I think is fun because he's kind of a crossover actor. Lots of Heroes fans out there. So I feel bad because I don't know what else he's doing right now in television, but I think that's a fun one that a lot of people will be excited about.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see, who else? Oh, Santa Gorn was very happy to learn that Bobby Clark, the original Gorn, will be returning once again.
I wondered if Santa Gorn was going to have his photo taken with Bobby Clark this year.
So now this is something that Santa Gorn was very upset about. It's weird to talk about myself in the third person, but Santa Gorn was very upset because there was a picture taken last year, but it wasn't with Santa Gorn's iPhone because it was inside his inner pants and I couldn't get it out. So somebody else took the photo and I was hoping that it would get posted somewhere, and it never did. So the picture of Santa Gorn and the real Gorn didn't happen. But rumor has it that this year Santa Gorn may have an intrepid assistant with him who may be willing to take that picture.
Yes, we'll have a very enterprising elf, and that elf, don't know who she is, but I'm sure she'd be nice enough to take a picture.
That would be wonderful. I'm sure Santa Gorn would very much appreciate that.
Okay, this is getting creepy. I'm kind of like talking about ourselves in the third person.
It is kind of weird, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of Santa Gorn, a quick aside, you can now follow him on Twitter at the Santa Gorn. At the Santa Gorn. He's on Twitter, so feel free to. And as you get closer to the convention, he'll be tweeting out a few tidbits and things, especially at the con. He'll be letting you know when he's coming down, so that you can look for him.
Well, that's handy.
Yeah. Last year we had some people who made some remarks that they had no idea when he was going to be around, and they were looking for him and they missed him. So this year we don't want that to happen. So
right. But it will be limited appearances. Just beware, everyone.
Yes, it probably will not be every day this year. So last year it was every day for 5 days, and I think this year we're going to cut it back. But anyway, back to the guest list. We have a couple more. Richard Hurd, of course, Admiral Owen Paris from Voyager, and Rosalind Allen, who played Yanar on the TNG episode The Outrageous Okona, and finally the man himself, Mr. Adam Nimoy.
Woohoo!
Will be back, so that'll be really cool.
The whole Nimoy family there.
Yeah, I know they said Danny said that Julie was coming as well, so we'll have the whole clan there. That'll be really nice.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that Patrick Stewart does a photo op by himself.
Yes.
We don't know. We don't have any photo ops announced at this point, nor autograph prices. And the rumors I've heard is that he would just possibly do a group cast photo, which will be far out of my price range, but I really wanted to get a better picture with him. So I will just pray to the Star Trek gods that happens. But yeah, right now, I mean, it's a pretty great list for TNG. Lots of good people, lots of familiar faces. I'm excited to see what will be on the schedule panel wise, which we will find out, like 3 days before the convention.
Well, I'm going to say that I know this isn't going to happen, but I'm still keeping my fingers crossed. Please, 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 please reconsider Will Wheaton, please. I have never met Will Wheaton. I would love to. And I know it's not going to happen, but
yeah, probably not. I think they would have to do a lot to change his mind about coming to
this would be the year to do it, though. The 30th would be the year to do it.
It would be. I mean, I think it's just one of those topics of conversation that,
I know.
Not good blood there, but we hope that maybe this year everyone can overcome their differences and Will Wheaton can attend.
We would hope. Next thing on the STLV news list is the ticket package statuses, and we do have a couple of sold out packages now. Gold and Captain's Chair are completely officially sold out, but Copper is still available, and I think there's some GA package tickets there that are still available, but no individual day passes have gone on sale yet, and still no thoughts on whether or not we're going to get the Groupon. No indications, rather, if we're going to get the Groupon.
No indications. Again. Everyone seems pretty convinced that they will have them, since the convention likely will not sell out this year. I'm still like, take your chances if you want. Basically, it's very possible that they will throw some out at the end of the year, and we're going to go into some detail about the ticket options in a future episode for STLV. Just to have out there. I mean, unfortunately, with the gold and the Captain's Chair sold out, it's going to be difficult to get those. However, we do have a group on Facebook. It's the STLV 2017 Buy Sell Ticket Group, and that is linked to in the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas Convention group as well. And there are people reselling their tickets, some of them at a lesser price than they paid for gold and Captains.
Well, there you go.
So there is still hope.
Yes, and by the way, just a quick aside from that, buying a creation convention ticket, and I know we've said this on the shows before, it can be a very dangerous proposition because, their tickets are nothing more than a PDF that's mailed to you. So easy for someone to create a dupe and send you a dupe or sell copies of that same ticket to multiple people.
Yes.
And, you could get the first person to get to the con with that ticket gets in. The rest of them, when they go to scan it, it's already been used. So
yeah.
Be
we
really
do our
careful.
best, but I do have to emphasize that we are not liable.
No, we are not. We are not.
Should something happen,
No,
you
no,
have
no.
to use your best judgment. We approve people the same way that we do in the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group, where we look at their profile. Most of the time, these are people who are already in our group or the official creation group.
Yep, but not all the time.
But not all the time. It's basically as long as they've got Star Trek in the profile. We do our best to keep everyone safe, but
it's not an exact science.
Yeah, please, use caution and feel free to message us if you need to asking. I've had people ask for advice, so that's totally fine. But we do have some guidelines on there, like with using PayPal and how to be protected with PayPal and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So just be aware that group is there. Use at your own risk. We're there to help, and good luck.
Yes. Good luck if you want to buy. And you also hotel rooms too, hotel room reservation transfers. But the Rio is still not sold out, by the way. If you guys out there are still looking for a hotel room and you want to spend the extra money to stay directly at the Rio, there are still package deals available there. But the Gold Coast has also released their package prices, which are pretty good. About half, I think, of what the Rio is. So, we talked many times on the past episodes about staying at the Gold Coast versus staying at the Rio, so we're not going to rehash all the pros and cons here. But if you are looking to get into STLV on the cheaper side, staying at the Gold Coast is a really great option. And if you go to our unofficial Facebook group, there's a link there with a code that you can use to call up with or buy online. That will get you a good discounted rate. And let's see. Autograph and photo op tickets, of course, are not on sale yet either. Yep. So no need to rush over to the creation site yet and try to get your Patrick Stewart photo op. Although I will say, Heather, if they do announce a solo Patrick Stewart photo op, I will have to buy one because I do not have a Patrick Stewart photo.
Yeah, I've got the one and it's all right, but it's just, it's past life, Heather, and I want current, present Heather, and hopefully a smile from Patrick Stewart. So I'm crossing my fingers.
Yes. So you know what? Also, we've been talking a lot about the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group that we both moderate, and I wanted to really quickly talk about some of the hard work that you've been doing in the group these past couple of weeks. The pin post is nice and tidied up, and we've got some new rules up and a lot of new really useful documents that you've been putting together.
Yay! Well, yeah, there's some other groups that I've looked at, and I feel that they're super organized, and I've always wanted to do this for hours, and I finally just sat down and made the time to do it. So I did clean up our pinned post that has the rules, and so it's pretty standard rules, but we did update them. So if our members are listening, you should go read them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess so. Over in the files, there are still some files that people have added in previous years, like other Star Trek groups that are on Facebook. There's one from Michael who had done, so last year with the 50th, there were a lot of people that could not get a ticket and who were going to come to the convention regardless. Mm-hmm. So he has a file up there that's an STLV no ticket Trek experience. It just talks about things that you can do. And I'm leaving those things up because I think that they are still beneficial even without a convention sellout. But I did make sure to add some different convention tips. We've got Eric Allen Hall's con tips, which he has written and shared several years in a row, and people love those, as well as an STLV convention guide by Melissa Whaley, which also got a lot of great feedback. It was super helpful, and then people have been adding more comments to those. But the things that I've been working on specifically mostly. There's a file, it's STLV 2017 tickets and perks. And so that kind of goes through, it's a chart and it just tells you what you get with each ticket level. But we have so many people that come around and ask, oh, well, what does this ticket come with? Can I do this with this ticket? So I just made a very simple graph that will show you the perks that come along with the different tickets. I didn't add prices or anything since those change every year.
It's super easy to read, by the way. I really like that chart.
Thank you. I wanted to just make it super simple and clear, and people are welcome to share it outside of the group if they want to. So that's fine. And then the biggest one I've been working on is an STLV glossary file. And so that is kind of like the ABCs of STLV. It's basically a compilation of links to threads where we've talked about specific subjects like, is there a shuttle to and from the Rio? How do the Rio and Gold Coast compare? Different dining options, even vegan dining options. And then we've got questions about autographs and photo ops, cosplay, all the different podcasts that cover STLV. Here we are doing a podcast. I feel like a lot of people still don't listen to podcasts, so they may not hear this, but I hope that they might come across this glossary and say, oh, I could check out these podcasts and then hear all of these accounts of what it's like. So I included a bunch of those there. And then we are going to go through with Shore Leave and add Shore Leave where we talk about these specific subjects. We're going to link you to those episodes so that those are easily found as well. But I just wanted one place that everyone could go to find all the information they needed.
Yeah, it's brilliant. There's so much great information in there. And you know what, guys? It's all free. All you need to do is come to our group and request membership. And the link to that group, of course, is on our website here at the tricordertransmissions.com. You click on Shore Leave, and of course, you'll find the link there. So feel free to join up and take advantage of some of this great information that Heather has put together, and some of the wonderful people in the group have helped us to build over time. So
yes, I do have to add one more thing,
Sure.
just because people may not notice, but we also have a couple of events listed. We've been having some issues with getting them to show up across different media platforms, and we don't know why that is, but like I'm on my desktop and I go to the events tab in our group, and so it shows not the main event that we made, which is an STLV general meetup, but it does have Jesse's event, his newbies and solo travelers, and then the craft swap meet. I made an event for that, which will be to be determined closer to the convention. I know that if you go, like I have an iPhone, and if I go to our group and go into events that way, then it brings up all of the meetups that are official. It doesn't show Jesse's, but it shows the others. So I don't know what the answer is. But just be aware that, definitely on iPhone you can go and it will show unofficial STLV group meetup and then the craft swap meetup, and you can join those. And I'll link to those in the STLV glossary stuff too. But we're trying to figure that stuff out, but just be aware that more events will probably be posted down the road, and we will share those in the group.
Yep. A lot of these events will also be listed on the show notes for this episode on our website. So if you're listening to this on our website, the notes should be right above where the player is. So feel free to check that stuff out. So let's see. I think that wraps up our STLV news portion of the show. Heather, anything else you want to add before we move on to our next segment?
Nope, I think that's good.
Okay, so we mentioned earlier in the show, we want to introduce you to a new thing here on Shore Leave. In true Star Trek fashion, we're going to be doing a bit of time travel, and we're going to be going back into conventions past in a segment that we're calling, I think, the Cons of Yore.
Yes.
Heather, I think that's what we're calling. Yeah, so
I made it up, and you seem to like it. So
I liked it. It sounds cool. It's got a nice ring to it. So, we talk a lot about the future conventions on this show, STLV in particular, and we talk about conventions that have just happened with some of our friends who come on, our roving reporter Marina, who come on to talk about other conventions. But we thought it would be kind of cool to go back and look at some of the earliest Star Trek conventions. We've got a few people in our Facebook group that have been to those early conventions, but I think for the most part, a lot of us are really more recent convention attendees within the last, 10, 15 years. So we're talking about going back to like the 1970s to the original first one. So this is going to be really interesting stuff. And here to be our guide on our travels is an early Trek convention attendee. She was present for the infamous Con of Wrath, which I'm sure you've heard about before, and among many other conventions, as well as being a very long time fan friend of Leonard Nimoy. So please welcome to the show, the fabulous Bonnie Moss.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. I know we've been trying to line this up for a while, and we finally got all the stars aligned.
Well, it's nice to know that I reside in the land of Yore.
Well, just some of the stories, not you yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, parts of me are, but anyway, it's nice to be in the past and the present right now.
Yes. So I wanted to quickly touch on some things about you personally, and something that you've told me in the past, but we haven't had a chance to talk much about, is your longtime fan friendship with Leonard Nimoy and his family. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. And I'm glad you said fan friendship, because I don't want anyone to get the impression that I went over for high tea to the house or vacationed with any of them or anything like that. But I first met Leonard back in 1979, and I can go into greater or lesser detail depending on where the conversation takes us. And we hit it off and saw each other off and on over the years at either some of his lecture appearances or his theater appearances or at conventions. And we always found time to talk. Ultimately, I ended up sponsoring 2 of his photography exhibitions. And that's where we kind of got to know each other even better. And I was actually at the Emmy Awards function in Boston. No, I guess it would be June 2014, just 6 or 7 months before he passed away, and got to see him receive his honorary Emmy. And we were able to talk on that occasion as well. And in terms of the family, I've known since I was about 12, 14 years old. I started a collection on Star Trek, which quickly focused on Spock, which then segued into Leonard Nimoy. And over the years, word had kind of gotten out that, Bonnie has a lot of stuff, And then, as I say, we had some mutual acquaintances, Rich Michelson, Gary Hass, and some other people that Leonard and I both knew. And one day I was at home and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it said, "Is this Bonnie Moss?" And I said, "Yes." "This is Adam Nimoy." Not the call you expect to get. I think there had been some communication through an intermediary by email, and they said there was a chance he would call, and he did. Long story short, I ended up contributing some materials to For the Love of Spock. Yay! And received not only as a contributor, but in the special thanks section, along with 200 other people. I was also acknowledged for contributing some of those materials. And I'm an associate producer on Julie's upcoming documentary, Remembering Leonard. And I know of at least one photo from my collection that they're going to be using in that. So, and then finally met Danny initially. You guys can tell me about Danny, so I'm not going to go that far. But, of course, through Shop LLAP, and I got acquainted with that back when it was on Etsy.
Right, in the early days.
Yes, and ordered several things from there. And then, as I say, emails through that. We finally met at the convention all of us were at this past August in Vegas, and had some lovely conversations there, and have been able to pass on some things to Adam, Julie, and Danny from my collection. I just feel at this point, it's the right thing to do. A lot of these things they had never seen. Right. They, did not have, you're not thinking about collecting on your dad, or your puppy, So I have sent them all things, and they have been most gracious and so appreciative. I got an email from Julie night before last, I think, and she just said, "You're sending us treasures, treasured items." So that means a lot.
What kind of things, may I ask, did you send?
Well, I have album after album of movie stills, promotional photos, newspaper clippings, press books, stills from both television, movies. I have things from other countries, and other roles other than Spock. I mean, I would send things on Catlow and Baffled and A Woman Called Golda and, Never Forget and all of those things. And theater programs, that I had. Just snapshots that they had never seen before, and promotional items and movie magazines. I have 3 boxes of magazines featuring Leonard Nimoy from 1966, through his Mission Impossible years. And they're like, we have not seen this stuff. We were kids, we were embarrassed to be in these magazines, So a lot of them have family photos of Julie and Adam, photos of their grandparents, and so I've been sending them some of these magazines as well. And Adam said in the conversation with me on the phone, he goes, where did you get all of this? And I said, I was a teenage girl, and we teenage girls are very precocious and obsessed and, and do this. And so I started very young. I said, Adam, if you're a coin collector, you expect someone to have a lot of coins. If they call themselves a stamp collector, you don't want to see 3 stamps, so it's what I did and I guess it's rare that interest would continue these many years later, but it's been a wonderful ride. And as I say, I'm so gratified that I can now pass some of these things on.
That's wonderful. Can I ask you really quickly? You told me you listened to the recent episode we did with Danny, and what a connection we had with her. But Heather and I are very, very attached to the Spock character and Leonard Nimoy as well. I just was wondering, what was it about the Spock character that made you into this collector and this lover of the character and the man?
That's a good question that has so many answers. And I think it's changed over the years. As you grow, you find different facets. When Star Trek premiered and I was watching it the night that it premiered, my first response was basically, this is better than Lost in Space,
Oh, God, yeah.
Because that was all we had before then, with the exception of Twilight Zone, which scared me as much as it fascinated me, below my child self, because some of those episodes were intense for a young child. Yeah. So I was attracted to the show because even at that age, I could tell it was on a higher level of communication in terms of what they were trying to tell you, in terms of there was a message, not just, monsters and bombs going off and everything. Very quickly, it turned to, as it did for many people, the Spock character. This is different. This is someone whom I would like on a personal basis. This is someone who's smart, who's loyal, who would do anything for his friends, who saves the day. Occasionally we let Kirk save the day, but Spock saved it. We know this. And, again, segueing into going into my teenage years with, during the latter part of the show and the early syndication, he's a good looking guy, Yeah. So, let's kick in then at that point, and so you get it on that level. And then I thought he was an excellent actor. People forget he was the one nominated for an Emmy all 3 years during the show. And I have one of those Emmy programs, original Emmy programs from those award shows. And so I was like, he's really good. Well, let me watch him in something else. So I would see him in other things. Then my respect for his talent grew, and I enjoyed watching his work. And then when I met him in 1979, and that's been 35 years ago. If he, you sometimes don't want to meet people you really admire, because then they turn out, they're sometimes not what you thought they were. And I know y'all probably had that experience too. But he was so incredibly gracious and funny and warm and appreciative and humble and still good looking. And, and as I say, we clicked, and I'm not the only fan he clicked, never would I say what my experiences or my observations are singular, but they're my experiences, so I'm just relaying that. So once I met him, it was like, okay, that's it. I felt validated, of course. Of course, I was already 10 years ahead of the game by the time I met him in terms of collecting. And then from then on, it was so it's multi-layered. It was the show, then it was the character, then it was his work, and then it was him.
It sounds exactly like our reasoning for it. So I
Is that good? Is that good or is that scary?
No, it's great. I think that we have heard the same type of things from other people who were as enamored with the Spock character and eventually Leonard himself and how special he was. I think all of us kind of connect for this from the same reasons in the same places.
Mm-hmm. So there's something to that for that thread to be somewhat consistent among some people of so many different origins and demographics and everything. That's significant, I think.
Yeah, I do too. Just speaks of his rareness.
Yes. He was unique. I mean, he really was unique because he had it going on every level. And that's not to deify him or anything. He would freely admit his failings and has. And he learned from what mistakes he made in his life, as do we all.
Yeah.
He was a very humble person, and I think that is just a very wonderful quality to have, especially in Hollywood, because you just don't see it very often.
No, and he never took it for granted. He was when somebody would say, "Oh, I came to see you from Iowa," he'd go, "Really? Iowa? You came all the way from Iowa to see me talk?" I mean, it wasn't feigned. I mean, it was. I can't believe you got on a plane and came from North Carolina. I mean, I went to see him at a convention in Boston back in 2000, a smaller convention, which was great. It was, not among the chain conventions, I call them. And, and of course we saw each other and kind of waved. And so when they came around to, question time, I was always one of those first out of the seat and get behind the microphone. And I said, I'm back up here from North Carolina. And he was like, "You came again from North Carolina?" And I'm like, it isn't that far from North Carolina to Boston. But he was sincere in that he could not believe, and he would always just be amazed at the lines of people that wanted this autograph. I mean, he got used to it on some level, but on another level, it was still kind of surreal to him.
One of the things that they said near the end of For the Love of Spock that really resonated with me was they were asking, one word to describe Leonard, and one of the things that one of the people said, they called him a Renaissance man. And that really resonated with me because he really seemed to embrace a love of art and creativity. He just loved all the mediums. He loved not only acting, but photography and directing. And he just sampled all of it and he excelled at all of it. And, I think that was a great way to leave his mark on so many different types of media and reach so many more people's lives.
Yeah. And it was a genuine interest and like a passion for many of those things. And let me just write a book, to write a book, or let me do some photography just to have it. No, he really delved into it and had a passion for it.
Absolutely. He remained a very curious guy. He remained a very creative person. Goes without saying, he was extremely intelligent and intuitive. And that's a lot to bring, to any pursuit that he had. I mean, actor, he was a writer, he was a poet, he was a producer, he was a narrator, he was a show host, he was a philanthropist, he was a director, photographer, as you mentioned. That's rare not only rare in the entertainment business, that's rare, period.
And rare to do it all so well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as you so aptly said, it was very natural for him. It wasn't to accomplish something beyond the creative process.
Yeah.
Indeed. So thank you for sharing that with us. I know you've also come here to talk about your convention experiences, but I think Heather and I always appreciate a side journey into the life of Leonard Nimoy on shore leave.
Oh, yes. When you if and when you want a longer journey, I have some wonderful stories that I know Leonard would not mind my passing on. We actually had the opportunity in Massachusetts one time for me to bring some of my collection up there, and we spent almost an hour going through his entire career,
Oh, wow.
through these materials. I learned something about Leonard over the years, and then we'll go to the convention thing. When he would see something, when I'd hand him something to autograph or hand him something, if he held on to it or looked at it for a long time, he wanted it. And I finally caught on to that, I mean, he wasn't so, gauche as to say, well, will you give me this or can I have it? He'd just go, wow, where'd you get this? Wow, I hadn't seen it. Would you like it, Mr. Nimoy? Yeah.
That's great.
And then he'd autograph whatever I wanted, once he had that, but being able to one-on-one go over a number, and during that time when we were going over a number of things, when he was kind of doing his career review, I said, Mr. Nimoy, if there's anything you want in here, you are welcome to have it. And he started turning pages, and then one thing would start sliding out. 4 pages, and another thing would be sliding out. So anyway, that was, I was thrilled that I could communicate with him like that and share some things and some stories, some wonderful stories. And over the years, I've been able to talk to. We just lost Lawrence Montaigne, who told me some wonderful stories. Michael Forrest has told me some wonderful stories. Ed Nelson, who was a friend of Leonard's early on in his career, who, Google him, he's one of those character actors that has been around forever and was the doctor in Peyton Place, if you remember that show.
Yeah. Yep.
That was Ed Nelson, but they started out both young and broke in Hollywood, and he told me some wonderful stories. So there you go. Let's go back to days of yore at the conventions.
Well, it sounds to me, Heather, like we may have a return trip for Bonnie in the future to talk about some of these other stories.
I certainly agree with that.
Awesome. So, as we said earlier, we are going into the conventions past. This is something a little new for us here on Shore Leave. We usually focus on conventions that are coming up or ones that have just passed or in the recent past. So we thought it would be kind of cool to have some stories about what the earliest of Trek conventions were like for our listeners out there, many of whom probably don't know much about these or weren't around to attend them. So Bonnie Moss is here to tell us a lot about her experiences at some of these earliest Trek conventions. Bonnie, when was your first Star Trek convention?
I think it was, and I wasn't at the very first in New York, which was what, 73, something like that. But I started in 76, so not too long after that was my first convention. And of course, I'm 18, 19 years old, so you're not getting on a plane to go to New York or, Los Angeles for conventions at that age and at that time. You were going to the local conventions initially. So a lot of conventions I went to were in North Carolina or Virginia. I'm in the South, if you haven't been able to tell from the accent. People tell me I have one, but and I had a joke about that too. I told them one time that DeForest Kelley was the only person on the show that didn't have an accent. He thought that was hilarious. So anyway, so I have the accent. So you went regionally, to things. And back then, and I think I mentioned this to you, Jeff, earlier, if they could get one actor or one writer, that was huge. It was unfathomable that you would get 2, 3, the entire cast. It just wasn't the norm. So if you had a convention in Roanoke, Virginia that had George Takei, massive influx to Roanoke, Virginia, that was a star, and so a lot of conventions were like that. But these smaller conventions also brought writers and because there wasn't that huge, social media was non-existent. If you heard about it, it was word of mouth, or somebody had a flyer and would send it in a chain letter kind of thing. It was that type of stuff. So they could get people that probably later on you couldn't get or were too expensive, because there wasn't the demand. There wasn't the publicity, and the full Trek resurgence hasn't happened yet. I mean, this is before the first motion picture,
Yeah.
So it was a different time. But those were the small little conventions where I got to talk to Theodore Sturgeon. Then I got to talk to Lee Brackett, whose name might really be familiar, but she was in Greensboro, North Carolina at a little convention. Lady with salt and pepper hair and pearls and blah blah blah. And I just talked to her in the hallway. Didn't even realize she was a guest. We had a nice little conversation, and she walked off. And they said, "Oh, you hit it off with Lee Brackett." And I went, and they went, "Well, she's a writer." And I said, "Well, what's she working on?" "Oh, she's working on something now called The Empire Strikes Back." And she's the one that received the screen credit with Lawrence Kasdan for that. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, these are the things you would have at the smaller conventions, sitting on a sofa eating potato chips and Cokes with David Gerald. Just, a very skinny David Gerald with a beard. Theodore Sturgeon was a lovely man, very low key, very unassuming. He looked like a professor, but yet very relaxed. These are the types of things at the smaller conventions, at that time, you didn't know what you didn't know in terms of the future possibilities. You just didn't, but it was so informal and so relaxed, and I treasure some of those memories.
Wow. That's fascinating stuff. And you mentioned earlier that you were in Vegas last year. That's a context I think a lot of our listeners understand, that the size and scale of conventions today. Can you give us a little bit more detail on how much different the conventions were back then as far as scale? I mean, I know Vegas is the biggest one we have, but
yes. Again, you had one star and maybe one artist and one writer, so the guest list was not expansive. The cost, maybe $20, and you would go in. That included autographs, photographs.
Wow.
Personal one-on-one time with these folks, and as long as you didn't, overstep your boundaries or be excessive in your demands, the sky was the limit in terms of their time. So now when I look at, okay, if you want an autograph, pay this and get this one, photo, pay this and get that didn't exist. It was, and the crowds, when I say crowds, 100, 300 was huge. And the stars would frequently, you would run into them anywhere. There was no security. They were not, there was, so the cost, relatively speaking, the accessibility, the low key nature of it all. And sometimes even the local newspaper wouldn't pick up that this convention, was taking place or had just taken place. Now, in terms of the conventions that were a bit larger, as I got a bit older and had some money in my pocketbook and didn't have to ask permission or get a break from school or whatnot to go to these things. Probably the first larger convention I went to was in Atlanta. It was Star Trek Atlanta in '78. And William Shatner and again, they had maybe 4 stars, I think it was Shatner and Jimmy and Walter maybe. But again, the idea of a full cast was just, you just didn't even go there because it took so much to get one, But I do remember Jimmy Doohan at that convention went up and down each aisle, would go down each aisle, across the aisle to speak to every single person that was in the room. Mm-hmm. When we got there, when he came to my friend Susan and I said, well, my mother said I was not going to be able to talk to you like this. He put his arm around me and said, where's your mother? We're going to go talk to your mother right now and prove her wrong because we do want to meet each and every one of you. And I said, my mother didn't come here to the convention with me. She said, and I still have that shot of him with his arm around me and my arm around my friend Susan, and he's looking for my mother. I mean, you can't get more of a personal touch than that.
Well, it sounds like there's an awful lot of things that were different. Nowadays, we have lots of different events and panels and things, but were there any kinds of events that happened back in those early conventions that don't necessarily happen anymore? I remember hearing stories of things like talent shows.
It was called filk singing because it got printed incorrectly in a program one time instead of folk. It went in as FILK singing. And so the filk singing was very good. That's when people would come with their own songs and a guitar, and they'd all be related to Star Trek or somehow, science fiction in general. And some of them were absolutely hilarious, and some of them were absolutely for an adults only crowd. And I do remember some of those. But this would be very informal again. It wasn't on stage. You pulled a circle of chairs around and filk singed, type of thing. And the costume contest, it was like, and I mean this disparagingly, I'm only looking compared to today, it was like Halloween. I mean, there wasn't the electronics, and there wasn't the movable parts, and there wasn't, these appendages and everything. People dressed up with what they had at home. It wasn't cosplay. It was it was a masquerade,
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if the word cosplay existed quite yet.
And when I first heard it, I was like, what the hell's that? And then I was like, oh, the masquerade, because that's what it was called the longest time. So it wasn't, and people would just, the things people would just applaud and go wild over back then would be they wouldn't even make the cut. In the semifinals now, because it's just become so crazy, detailed and professional. So, that type of thing. So, but some things, Jeff and Heather, are similar in terms of the panels and things like that. They're just not on the same scale. They are.
Were the conventions, were they usually just one day?
Many of them were. I would say the majority on a Saturday. There were a few. Now, again, Atlanta was a couple of days. Atlanta was 2 whole days, and I mean, this is with Shatner and all the, 2 days, out, boom. I would say weekends, but I'd say the majority were probably one day on a Saturday, a few 2-day. Then toward the late 70s, you would see the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I did go to a convention in 79 in New York, where that was the first one I went to. And it was called Star Trek America.
Oh.
All of this is pre-creation. How can you say something, with a name like creation, but there were things before creation, literally and figuratively. So this was, pseudo-independent. And this was... I guess the motion picture came out in 79, Star Trek motion picture. This would have been in September, I think, of that year. So that whole convention was like, what's this movie going to be like? What's this movie? And of course, it was a frenzy because there had not been any new Star Trek, for so many years. And so many, and they had the promotional materials out, the floor to ceiling standees and the posters. And I just remember being so excited being there for that. And Isaac Asimov was at that convention, and we got to talk, and it was just so. And I think Nichelle and Walter were there. Again, we hadn't hit the full cast thing. Yeah. That never was even proposed until 82 with, what became known as the Con of Wrath.
So now you were talking about the earliest cons and how much more accessible the celebrities were, and they were friendly, and they talked to a lot of people, and you had pictures with them with their arms around you and all of that kind of great stuff. Now, over the years, I mean, things like Shatner and his Get a Life and all of that type of thing. And did you notice that over time the celebrities changing in their demeanors from the earlier cons to the through the 80s and beyond?
Wow, that's a great question. Certainly, I don't know how much of it is they changed or the environment changed. And the demands upon them or the expectations changed. I think certainly what the most obvious change was the amount of time they could talk to you, the accessibility, as I mentioned earlier, the little things. You didn't get an autograph, you got a personalized autograph. You handed them something directly. You didn't go through an intermediary. They looked at it. They commented on it. They said, what's your name? They asked if it was a complicated name, how to spell it, little things like that. And now at some circumstances now, and I won't say it's universal, it's such an assembly line, and sometimes they don't even have the chance to look up. And they heck, I'm going to ask you your name or comment on what you've handed them unless it's alive or something, that part. So I think just the sheer volume of the participation now forces the actors or the guests to be more expedient, and I get that on one level, or on several levels. I mean, it's not just a gathering anymore. It's a business. And I'm not saying that, I'm not slamming that. There's a place for what's going on now too. I mean, I went to my first Vegas convention in 2011. So there's a place for that too, but you can't help but be a little nostalgic for the what, where, when. So in terms of the stars, I just think that they've had to change their MO, given the sheer numbers, and I can only imagine though how some of them, I've been hearing some of those stories since 1979, and I'm thinking, wow, and not to say I'm tired of it, but if I've heard that 10 million times, like for them, for 30, 40 years, because you can't make things up from 40, from the original series, things that happen on the set. They either happen or you can't add to that. You know what I'm saying? The memories, And so that, they have to kind of a repertoire of stories, which are wonderful, and one doesn't get tired of it. But I'm sympathetic with, what do they do to pump themselves up to tell the story again? 5 years, 40 years, 50 years later.
Yeah, and I think now, especially as they get older, I've actually seen criticism about how their stories change, likely just because they're forgetting parts of it.
Yes, and get enhanced.
Yeah, and whatever. It makes me a little sad to hear people actually like critiquing how an actor's story has changed. It just seems totally silly, but it's similar to doing a concert and playing the same songs over and over. Like, how do you get pumped up to tell that same story again? It's we need to find someone to ask, I think.
I think great question if you get one of those folks for whom this would be relevant, to do that. And in terms of the changing, I have heard and experienced that too, Heather. You're right on. And you don't know how much of it is fuzzy memory. You don't know how much of it is, I'm trying to make this interesting for those in the audience who may have heard it a number of times. I can make it appear as though this is new information when it may or may not be. And I don't mean that with intention to deceive. I'm just trying to bring something new, to it. So I think that factor definitely, again, not in a negative way, but I think that factor, does exist.
Yeah.
Great insights. Thank you for that. I actually never thought about it in that respect, that the growing size of the conventions and the amount of people there would have that sort of an impact. Usually you just thought you'd hear stories about people having experiences with certain celebrities and go, oh, well, they're changing or it's all going to their heads. But maybe that's not really the case in all their cases. So that's wonderful insight.
I will say, I know that like some of these smaller conventions around here, like we have Starfest in Denver, and though that one grows every single year, I think it's still one of the more intimate experiences where they have like a Friday night dinner thing. And of course you do have to buy an extra ticket for the meet and greet, but the main headliner guests are all there and they kind of go from table to table and talk to people. And then when you go to the actual convention and you go up to get their autograph or whatnot, I haven't been for many years, but like we talked to Marina Sirtis, probably for like 20 minutes. And we tried not to be rude. People seemed okay. They didn't seem too upset, but she just kept going and going. And it was definitely a much more relaxed environment than what you would find at STLV, where it's, oh, hi, here's the thing for you to sign. Thanks so much, and move along.
And I do think those smaller cons, you're right, they're still out there in pockets, and Larry probably has them tattooed on the back of his hand. And and could tell you these things because he is still a guest at at the larger and some of the smaller cons. And thank goodness for him. I'm glad that that what they call the fan run cons as opposed to a more corporate run.
Yeah. Starfest is fan run still, I believe, and I mean just totally different. We were talking in our Facebook group about the differences in conventions and like something big like STLV and something smaller. And, I basically said after going to Denver Comic-Con, like I've been to one con that is just too big. Like I cannot deal. And it's really difficult to get access to the stars. I mean, it's a quick autograph, a quick photo, and that's really it. And then Starfest is just a little too small for me. There's just not quite enough for me there to really fill all 3 days. And Star Trek Las Vegas is of course like the perfect one for me.
Yeah, it's on steroids. I mean, it really is bigger, better, everything,
Yeah.
And the advantage of the more recent cons certainly are the amount of guests they can, it's a double-edged sword, I mean, the number of guests, the people we probably would never have met at a smaller con, at least you have some exposure to at something like TLV.
Yeah, that's why I say everybody, go once in your life, especially if you're from a small town or somewhere where you don't get a lot of big guests at the conventions, or the convention is just too big and overwhelming and you can't handle it, because it is. I love that it's Star Trek focused. So we get all of our favorite Star Trek actors there in one spot. It's for me that makes it a very valuable experience. But I think it's still great to push the smaller fan run conventions because they have an experience that seems to be most similar to what you've spoken about in the early days.
Is there y'all talk a lot about conventions, obviously. Are there certain ones that both of you have wanted to go to and have not yet had the opportunity? Or of course, as you say, STLV is the ultimate, but are there ones you hear about that you go, oh man, I'd like to catch that one day?
I would have liked to have gone to Mission New York, which Jeff can tell you about because he got to go to that one. But I think the standouts, like San Diego Comic-Con sounds like, okay, you can get really cool stuff and see really cool people, but I don't think my anxiety could handle that since I can't even handle Denver Comic-Con. So the next option would be Dragon Con in Atlanta, which is still pretty large. I think it's spaced out over 4 different hotels, but I think that being set up in an area like that where you can move from building to building would be a little easier for me. And they've got such a wide variety of franchises that they cover, people that they invite, including a Star Trek focused panel. So I think that one would be really cool to go to someday.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff?
Well, I think that I've heard about this a few times from a few people, and I have never gone there. And I don't know if Heather has gone there or not, but there is actually a fan-run convention that has the same name as our podcast called Shore Leave.
And that's in Maryland?
It's in Maryland, and I've gone to a couple of what they call a New York away team meetups up in New York City. And, it's a bunch of Star Trek fans who get together and they dress up in uniforms and things and just kind of hang out for the evening. And a lot of them have asked me if I've ever been to this Shore Leave convention. Supposedly it's a lot of fun. So I think I would like to experience that one. And it's actually achievable because it's in Maryland. It's not that far.
Achievable for you. I was going to say maybe one day Shore Leave needs to go to Shore Leave.
That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was in New York for 2 years, and I have some friends that attend Shore Leave annually over STLV, and they love it, but I don't know much of anything about it. So maybe that is a trip for the future.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that input because, it's always interesting. As I say, I'll talk to a lot of people who go to, from different cons and who have attended different cons. So I didn't know what the current milieu, was like. So
Yeah.
and East Coast doesn't seem, and of course, again, it depends on the degree of activity of fans in the area. It depends on corporate decision making. Can we make money here? A lot of things. East Coast doesn't seem to fare as well with conventions than other parts of the country. Would you agree, Jeff? I mean, once you get out of the New York area.
Yeah. Yeah, the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area is getting to the point of oversaturation, I think, with conventions. But once you get out of that tri-state area, it's
Mm-hmm.
much more scant. I was just that same thread in our Facebook group that Heather was just mentioning before, where we were talking about all the different conventions that we go to or would like to go to. I made a post there about all of the conventions that I go to. Thankfully, a lot of them are inexpensive, but it's getting to the point where it's just too many. There's a lot of mixed genre stuff here that are kind of sci-fi, horror, comic book mix-up, mash-up type things. Then there's, the real Comic Cons. Then, Philadelphia, New York. Then there's the fake knockoff Comic Cons that call themselves Comic Cons, but they're really not Comic Cons. Like there's one coming up this weekend that's just called the Greater Philadelphia Comic Con, but it's not actually in Philadelphia and actually kind of nowhere near Philadelphia. But they wind up getting Trek actors there. Like LeVar Burton's going to be there, and I
Ah.
believe Nichelle Nichols is going to be there, and a couple of other are going to be around there. But they've had original series cast members the last couple of years. They've had Jonathan Frakes and some other TNG, so they get them. But the Mission New York, of course, happened, and it's just there's so many conventions around this area. I feel bad though that they don't spread out a little bit more along the East Coast. I think between New Jersey and Georgia and Atlanta, I think you got quite a dearth of area where they just don't do much.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're exact. The Southeast is really, and Larry and I have talked about this at length, because we both have discussed why, and is it corporate? Because there isn't the population, that would be a potential draw.
Yeah.
And you really don't see creation even in the Southeast. I mean, have you seen Creation Charleston, Creation Savannah, Creation? And obviously they've done their demographics, and
They
so
did. I'm sorry to interrupt you. They did do a Nashville convention, and I can't remember what year that was. And that was
50th or no?
I don't know.
No, I don't
It
think
wasn't
it
for the
was.
50th. It was at least, I think it was even like maybe 2 or 3 years before. And I think they were just trying to monopolize on the popularity of STLV, and I guess maybe like the Cherry Hill or whatnot, and just trying to expand because they were they do a Creation Boston one. I feel like, or is that too close to the Cherry Hill?
No, Boston's a good 6 hours at least by car.
I
so it's a
feel
good
like
ride.
they did a Creation Boston. I know they did the Nashville one, and the Nashville was only 1 year, and it was maybe 6 to 12 actors.
Those weren't more recurring ones. Those are kind of one-offs that they just tried them
Yeah.
and they didn't.
That might have been to test the waters, and since they haven't been back, the waters must must not have been lucrative.
Yeah, I think people are just still drawn like to go down to Atlanta or up to Philadelphia in that area. I know I'm from Kentucky, and I know there's a small one somewhere in Kentucky because I had friends and family who went to it. But again, nothing incredibly impressive, but at the same time, even if it's, those 3 stars, that's still a lot of one-on-one time, intimate time with those 3 actors.
That's right. It's all a trade-off, isn't it? You either have and each has its, charms.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I mean, the first time I met Walter Koenig years ago was at a horror convention of all things. Here in New Jersey. And the great thing about it was that nobody was there for Star Trek. They were all there for horror because you had, the stars of all the big horror franchises, and The Walking Dead, of course, that was drawing everybody. So Walter was in a room with a bunch of other people from 60s TV shows and 70s TV shows, and he would just walk up. You walk right up to him, and he was personable. I must have talked to him for a good 15 minutes. And that was the first year this podcast, it's almost 4 years ago now. This was the first year this podcast was going. And I actually gave him a Tricorder Transmissions button, and he put it on. I have a picture of him wearing it. And it was a wonderful, sweet interaction. So, these conventions may not be big, giant affairs, but, there's something to be said for these smaller ones that have that more intimate feel, because maybe you can get that experience of these older Trek cons.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. You had a microcosm of what those older, smaller cons were like. Absolutely. The quality of the interaction.
So I think this brings up a good question, because with the smaller conventions, I mean, back in the day, I think, everyone was excited to see the actors, because an actor coming to your town was a big deal. And over time, like with STLV, there are so many actors, and that's just one that you go to, whether you're going to see the actors, to go to the panels, or for Jeff and I to go see our friends.
Yep.
This will be my 9th year going to STLV, and the most important thing there these days are people like Jeff and like you who become Star Trek family. So it's a big family reunion. So I was curious if there was any sense of that, like family or community back in the days of yore when the cons were first starting, or if you've seen that develop over time.
Most definitely. And I agree with your, assertion that a lot of people go not only for the stars in the program, but it's the family reunion. I mean, this past year, in this coming year, in August, I'm going to be seeing, friends from Texas and Iowa and, California, and, friends I don't get to see, on with any frequency. And so it is a family. It's a family reunion, and there are many different families there.
Yeah.
Interests and goals and purposes, but it's a family nevertheless. I think you did have that in the smaller conventions, but of course people weren't from that far away. You didn't have national kind of family. You had a regional family, so it was there again, just on a smaller scale. And again, without social media, what you were doing was exchanging addresses. You could only speak to each other or call each other. You communicate, and that's one of the stories I won't. I'm sure it will be addressed. I addressed it some in my interview, and I know other people will. Why the Con of Wrath was so interesting, because so much went wrong and there was no way to communicate. People didn't have cell phones, and they didn't have, so, you'd go down the hallway to the elevators and go, does anyone know what's going on? Where do we meet? I mean, it literally was like that. So in the smaller cons, you would make that family, but you really had to work at maintaining it if they weren't in your town, because there wasn't the instantaneous interaction that you can have now.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. Yeah, my goodness. I guess we take it for granted, Heather, that the minute the convention is over, we're able to still stay in touch with every one of those people all day long if we want to. And that's one of the things that's really built our family so much over the past even 4 years. Just for me, is just being able to talk to all of you constantly. Like we're actually all a part of our each other's lives now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that has been very much a positive change, because you really couldn't even talk on the phone. There wasn't unlimited calling.
Long distance,
it was long distance, and you paid through the wazoo for it, and so you couldn't call these people every night or every weekend, or even that was a special event. And kind of combining this with the Nimoy collection type of thing. This was before eBay. This is before when I started all of this. And so I would write the studios. I would get a movie magazine, and they would sometimes list agents in the back. And I would write the agent. I would write the network. I would write, that's how you got stuff. I would write the newspapers. You wouldn't believe the stuff newspapers would send me. The photo of that picture of Leonard Nimoy in the Boston Globe, because they didn't want it. And back then, I mean, after they've used it,
Yeah.
They were like, whatever. It wasn't so, now, of course, with copyrights and this, it wasn't so tight back then. And so I would wait weeks by my little mailbox thinking maybe something will come today from one of these letters. And of course, and I'll try to put a lid on my resentment here. Now people can click.
Yeah.
Yep.
Photo. And they can click and have 1 million photos. And I'm like, I waited 3 weeks for that. And, they just posted it on Twitter after a click, So, that's a real change, that it's made us old timer collector types, virtually obsolete. Not on some level, but on a lot of levels, because everything's so accessible now. And back then, you waited for that photo, you treasured it. Of course, you got some things originals you couldn't get now, but then again, it's a click away now, and so that kind of takes away from some of the work that I'll never get that time back.
But it was time well spent.
Yeah, I will counter that by saying that so many of the things you've been able to give to the Nimoy family, I know how much they must treasure them, and I think that is just a great payoff, to be able to have given, even to Leonard himself, to have shown him things that he had never seen. Hopefully that helps set that off a little.
I appreciate that, Heather. I really do. And you're right. There has been that trade-off, and I hope to continue. I'm organizing things more than I used to. The photos went in this box and the magazines went. I'm now putting things in albums. I'm now getting all the press books together. I'm getting all the publicity materials together, trying to be more organized. And as I'm finding things, as I say, I'm sending them to Adam or Julie or Danny, and would be happy to with other family members. And I think some things may get disseminated, through the family. I do remember on one of those Boston Globe photos that I had Leonard sign one time, again, he held on to it, and I'm like, oh crap, he's going to want it. I'm just thinking, which I would have given it to him freely. But he's like, where did you get this? And he turns it over. Of course, it has stamped Boston Globe, appearing this issue, this and this. And he said, you got this from the Globe? And I went, yeah. He said, how did you get it from the Globe? I said, I asked him for it. And okay. And he really enjoyed seeing it. And thankfully, he personalized it, signed it, and gave it back to me, So, just really different. But thank you for that, Heather. I do think that's quite true. And as I say, they've all been incredibly gracious. Adam even flew me to New York for one of the advanced screenings for The Love of Spock. So much appreciated, So that's the 15-year-old girl in me is going, whoopee,
Oh yeah, trust me. I got my friend Claire and I got to be in the documentary talking about Spock. She's talking, I'm just standing there, but I will fangirl over that for the rest of my life.
As well you should, girlfriend.
That's great. So, getting back to, you had mentioned the Con of Wrath, and I was going to pose another question. I hope the answer is not the Con of Wrath, but do you have any particular favorite year or convention that you went to that you would call out as the one that you have the fondest memories of?
Yes, I could actually say that. Although naturally there were certain things you take away from each convention that's different or unique. But I would say it's the convention in 2009 that was in Boston that was called the New England Fan Experience. And it was a fan-run con, and it was like this little nugget, because again, by 2009 the larger big cons were in full swing, but somehow this kind of went under the radar a little bit. And Leonard was one of the guests, and I think truly he came because he wanted to come back to Boston. He always, even though he left at 18, I mean, his so much of his heart and soul was still in Boston, and so I think they made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and Boston was included. There's a chance that he also wanted to bring, I don't know whether Susan was with him or not, but he truly enjoyed bringing Susan to the places where he grew up and the experiences he had, to share that with her, So I know he did that, if not on that trip, on some other trips. And as I say, it wasn't a very, very large convention. Wasn't on Vegas term, but it wasn't the local yokel. It was an in between, but I'd say on the side of being smaller. That being said, that was the convention where I was wearing one of Danny's shirts from ITZY at that time, the Matisse dancers, the large, healthy women, and I was wearing it. And I, of course, ran up to the microphone to ask my question, and Leonard and I did a little exchange. Then he kind of narrows his eyes, and I know he's looking at my shirt, and I'm like, yes, I'm wearing this shirt, And he said, did you get it from the website? And I said, meaning ITZY. And I said, yes, I did. He said, come on up here. So he asked me on stage with him. So, I came up on stage. Once I got on stage, I did this little happy dance, which he found quite amusing. And so he said, well, I want to tell you about the shirt here. So I'm standing there, and of course, on some absurd level, I'm going, oh, he's looking at my chest. This is great. Of course, he's looking at the shirt and describes the shirt and what it was about, and the photography thing, around it and all this stuff. And of course, as I say, it is for the folks who don't know, it was part of his full body project photography series with very large women. And of course, the message was size doesn't matter and shouldn't matter. And he recreated the Matisse dancer painting with these large, voluptuous women. So anyway, he describes the shirt, and then he says, oh, you were going to ask a question. What's your question? And I said, how do I become one of these models? He cracked up, completely cracked up. And in fact, started to talk, had to stop because he was laughing so hard he couldn't finish his sentence. And then he kind of got back and he goes, well, you're modeling for us today.
That's awesome.
So I struck a pose and everything. And then the little things that he would do that other people might not recognize. He took my hand and said, be careful getting off stage.
Yeah.
Oh.
Things like that. And that was just the start of that convention. There were several really sweet interactions. Leonard's parents had written me back in the 80s a letter, Max and Dora Nimoy, and they were still in Massachusetts at the time. They had not relocated to California as they did later. I kept that letter for years and years and years, and I just had it in my head. A voice kept saying, Leonard needs to have this. He needs to have this. He needs to have this. And I thought, well, this is as good. Again, it was another one of those conventions where they took more time. He personalized things. And this was 2009, folks, much later, and really took it. So, and again, we kind of not as well as we became to know each other, but still, he would know who I am because he'd seen me in 79 and 80 and, several other times. So I came down the autograph line. Again, he was taking his time, and I pushed the envelope towards him. He literally froze. I mean, froze at the table, and he looked up and he said, that's my mother's handwriting. And I said, yes, it is. He said, this is from my mother. And I said, yes. And he literally was just almost did not know what to do.
Yeah.
And then I said, I want you to have it. And I mean, it was a moment. It was
I can tell that just listening to the story.
And he, leaned over the table and took my hand and said, thank you, thank you. Thank you. And I found out later, again, we can save this for the other show. I found out later, he told me later in 2010, I mean, no, later than that, maybe. So a couple of years later, when we were at a reception, he said, I've kept that letter on my desk. That letter is still on my desk. So between being on stage and having that moment regarding, and what the letter said was particularly touching for him, and I won't get into that, but those two events at that convention will always make it very special for me.
That's a wonderful story. I can't wait to do this other stories episode that we're going to do down the road.
Oh, that was a tease, Jeff.
Yeah, it's how you know how to do it. You know, that's great.
No, that's one of the big ones. There were some other stories, but that, and then when I found out later, it was always on. And of course, a part of me was like, well, no wonder he remembers my name, because it's on that envelope on his desk, every day. So so sweet things like that.
Yeah. Oh, such a good story. I've had warm fuzzies. I'm just like, oh.
And well, I appreciate that. And I did make a copy of the letter before I gave it to him. So I'm glad I did that. I'll say basically, his mother paid him some compliments, and I don't think they were always forthcoming.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's great love there, but they were not effusive people, Yeah. And she said some things I think Leonard really needed to hear.
Yeah. Wow. That's just remarkable, really.
And I was very touched that they had written me back. I had sent them something, some calligraphy or some artwork or something, thinking, I just wanted to do this nice thing for his parents. And she wrote back, as I say, just a love you, thank you letter, 2 pages, which was very sweet.
Sounds a lot like a granddaughter of Leonard Nimoy that we know, who I just said, just reached out nicely, and she was so kind to respond. And I think that just speaks volumes of the Nimoy family, that they are all so similar, so giving and kind, and just all very rare people. And Danny, I will use that forever, because Danny was the one that said that her grandfather was a rare person. But I cannot help to reiterate that Danny herself is so rare, and everyone in the Nimoy family, really, they're just.
I would agree. She's lovely. As I said, we had communicated via the store, but when I met, were y'all meeting her for the first time at this last convention too?
Yeah.
But I think it was the first time she'd had the table at the convention for Shop LLAP. We'll make that clear. And of course, when we saw each other, big hug, and told her it was good to see her. And I gave her a little gift there that made her eyes somewhat misty there too, and she was lovely. And I got to talk to Julie and David some as well. And as I say, yes, very cordial, very appreciative, very very humble. It's great.
I have to follow that up just by saying that, you never know when you take these small actions, like writing someone a letter, like you never know what's going to come of that. And I think that your story is just such an amazing example of just reaching out to Leonard's parents and getting something so special in response. And I just am a big proponent of taking those small little chances and just, throwing it out into the universe and seeing what comes back.
Absolutely. And you have to put it out there, throw it out there with the expectation that you won't hear anything back, because then it is a sincere, not another way of expecting something back. Or I think you're telling your truth more when you're just putting it out there with no hints or anything at expecting anything in return.
Yeah. I mean, like you, I had followed Shop LLAP since they were on Etsy, and I just thought, why does no one talk about, like, why has the shop not been interviewed? Why I've never really seen them featured anywhere, and I thought, why not? And the worst that can happen is Danny could say no, but she did the opposite, and now we just love her to death. So
it's just like you guys too, from what I see on Twitter and everything. So
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I think it's important, and just really good examples of how doing those things can just turn into really really beautiful moments and friendships and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And here's another friendship right here.
Yeah.
I look forward
Yes.
to meeting you. Well, meeting you face to face in Vegas this year.
Yes. Be
absolutely.
prepared for a selfie because we will take a picture together.
Okay, I'll start. I'll start getting myself together now. might take that long. Thank you.
No, well, thank you, Bonnie, for being a part of the show. And our only regret is it took so long to get you on. So it's been absolutely wonderful, and we're looking forward to having you back to tell some more of these great stories.
Yes. Yes. We hope that you will come back.
Oh, I would love to, and I appreciate your questions and your interest. Thanks so much.
Of course,
Absolutely. We will plan to get together in 4 short months, and I'll do our LLAP hand together.
All right, done.
That'd be great.
Okay.
So, as we're closing up the show here, Bonnie, could you be so kind as to tell the audience out there where they can find you if they're looking for you?
Yes, I am on Twitter at NC Bonnie1 because believe it or not, NC Bonnie was taken, which I can't imagine. And I am on Facebook. I'll be honest. I'm not. I'm not I'm not addicted to social media. Maybe that's my my past talking to me. I'm on those two places. Can't always promise a follow back or a response, but obviously, and that's to time too. I do have, like you guys, a full-time job. This is kind of a sidebar, so it's nothing elitist about it. It's a matter of what do I have time for, and how what's the quality of the interaction I can give someone who deserves it. And so, but that's where I am.
Okay, Heather Barker, where can people find you?
Oh, I'm on Twitter as Sketching Venus, and I'm somewhere on Facebook in that group that we moderate.
Oh, the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention Facebook page?
Yes, that one, Jeff. Thank you.
Oh, wow, I got it right the first time. Amazing. So you can find me there as well. And I'm also a J_Benge on Twitter. So the show is Shore Leave, and that's at Shore Leave on Twitter. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Tricorder Transmissions, and of course our own website at the tricordertransmissions.com. And as we're closing up, guys, don't forget our iTunes review contest is still running, and it's running until April 23rd of 2017. So you got a couple more weeks or so here to get your written reviews in, and please leave a written review and let us know who you are so that we can get you into the drawing for the $20 Shop LLAP gift card. And you can pick up some of the things we've been talking about on this show already. So you should know where to find it. And we hope to hear from you, of course, on social media as well. And thanks, as always, for listening. And we'll talk to you next time on Shore. Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are writing a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.